Welcome to the Deck Specialist Podcast for builders, designers, and deck pros pushing the limits of outdoor living. Get insider insights, advanced techniques, and strategies to grow your craft and your business. Because great decks build more than homes, they build reputations and memories. Get ready for something special, the Deck Specialist Podcast.
If you're tired of fighting warped, inconsistent deck framing, it might be time to rethink your joists. True Frame Joist from ProWood is built for pros who care about speed, consistency, and long-term performance. Every joist is pressure-treated for strength, kiln-dried for stability, and factory-planed for uniform sizing. So you spend less time sorting boards and more time building. True Frame stays straighter, installs faster, and cuts down on waste and callbacks, without switching materials or learning new systems. For consistency you can build on, try ProWood's True Frame Joist. Visit ProWood.com to learn more and find a dealer near you.
Okay. Welcome back to the Deck Specialist Podcast. Today I have Bobby Parks, whom you know from the pages of Deck Specialist magazine, whom you've seen on the trade show floors, and for many of you, whom you call friend. And so today I'm privileged to have him with us. And welcome, Bobby. I'm so glad to be able to talk with you today.
Thank you, Sarah. It's a pleasure to be here, and it's an honor to be on your podcast.
Well, you maybe people aren't aware, but you and I have been working together for about 4 years now. And when I joined as the editor of Deck Specialist magazine, you were one of the very first people I actually spoke with in the industry. And
that.
You made me feel very welcome. And from that point, you've shared so many columns with us and so many fun stories along the way. And I just wanted to continue a conversation that we began in the pages of Deck Specialist. You can see right here our latest issue. We featured you in the magazine, and I wanted to continue that conversation and just share with those who maybe didn't get a chance to read it or who have not read all of your columns over the years, so they get an understanding of who you are and why you write for Deck Specialist and why you've been an icon in the industry for nearly 40 years now. So going back to what we discussed in the feature, we shared that you started out in this industry actually kind of surprisingly. You built your first treehouse at 13. And I just want to give the listeners maybe a chance to relive that project. Can you share what that project was and how that started your building career today?
Yeah, it seems like a lifetime ago, but I remember I was in junior high school, and I lived in an area where it was just a kind of a dead end road, woods all around. There was a home mover that always had extra lumber around, so we always had access to that. And we were just always out in the woods playing, and decided to build this tree house. And we would take our bicycles, and we had a way that we could rig it up, and we could cart material quite a ways. We had a way of doing it. And I would go out and envision this little area where these trees were at that we could nail boards on and build the treehouse. So it was different kinds of wood. There was no color matches on anything. Some were painted, some were not painted. So it wouldn't have won any awards, but it worked. And it was 2 stories. We had our stairs, our climbing steps nailed onto it. We had a pulley system rigged up. I was in junior high school, and back then when we would get to school about 30 minutes before the bell rang, and we would have time to run across the ball field to go through this junkyard and come out on this other road where there was a service station or a gas station. And whenever the old guy that was the attendant there would go out to pump gas, he couldn't see the cigarette machine. So we could put 35 cents in the cigarette machine, pull the knob, drop out a pack of Marlboro and we would scatter after that. So we would sit up in our treehouse, we would smoke our cigarettes, we'd eat our candy bars, we'd drink our Coca-Colas. We were doing things that our mom had no idea that we were doing. But it was one of those things where as a kid, I could envision things. We built all these different kinds of forts. Some of them were probably death traps that we survived, but it was kind of the beginning of something that that ended up being a career path.
Well, did you have any idea at that point that you loved building?
No, not for sure. I didn't know what I wanted to do. I came from kind of a blue collar family. My dad was worked in, on electrical. It was industrial stuff. Ended up working in nuclear power plants, doing things like that. I think the thoughts were that I was going to become an electrician or something, but I had no interest in that. I know there's roles for people on that, but I just, as I started trying to really think about it, coming out of high school, I did decide that, I think I would like building. That seems like a direction for me to go. So right out of high school, went to work with a home builder, one of the top builders in Columbus, Georgia, which is where I was raised. They really built a nice, clean house, and they were building what was considered higher end at the time. So I was fortunate to go there to work and learn and, know how things were supposed to be done. I learned how to go into a lot where it was being developed, locate the property lines, pull the strings, put the batter boards up, get it ready for the foundation, and then come back in and basically frame the house, trim the house, and turnkey it towards the end. So, but I realized also that pretty early on that I could work for the builder I was working for and never be able to afford the house I'm building. So that kind of motivated me to go out on my own and decide that I wanted to try to subcontract work. I didn't have the confidence really necessarily, so I kind of partnered with a guy for about 6 months. We were kind of both in the same boat, but I learned that I could figure out things, and if I couldn't, there was always somebody I could ask. And that's kind of what launched me to be more of a self-employed contractor.
Was that with Architect? Is that correct?
Well, the original build was as a home builder, residential builder, which I did for years and years, was not with Architect. That was later on. I actually had been building houses, had been doing these apartment jobs. Had actually found this general contractor that was building in a lot around Atlanta. I lived in Columbus, but they did a job in Columbus, and that's how we met. And they offered me all kinds of work if I was willing to travel, and they would make it worth my time. So we ended up doing jobs in Chattanooga, around Atlanta. I did one up in Spartanburg, bounced around some different places through the years, but they ended up going into a bankruptcy. And I was on a job at the end of a year, and I decided I had the money to fund my crew. I had a big crew and had some expenses involved, but I thought I'll roll this into next year so I don't have to include it as part of my taxes. And I didn't realize they were having some issues. And when it came time to do that monthly draw at the end of June or end of January, because you didn't draw weekly there, it was a monthly draw after you'd been on the job. So I had a lot of money kind of built up in there. It was the first time in 4 years I'd ever skipped a draw. And they ended up filing bankruptcy and couldn't pay me. So I was kind of desperate, pawning equipment, to pay everybody else so I didn't have to file a bankruptcy. And I got through it, but I started looking for something that I could get by and get back on my feet with. I didn't have the money to fund a crew, so I just decided to find something for me and a helper. And there was an ad ran for an Architect franchise that was starting up in Atlanta, and they had a franchisor down that was hiring. So I thought, well, I could do that for a little while till I can, get in better financial shape. So I went in there, and back then I had hair almost down to my waist. I had light hair, but a black beard. I looked like I just got off a Harley when I went in there. But somehow the franchisor that came down from Richmond saw through all that, and they hired me after interviewing a lot of people. So that's how I really came in as the first crew in that situation. And then, over time as we grew, I came in as construction manager and then VP and really started learning the basics of business that I had no exposure to as a subcontractor, because you're riding a builder's coattails, or general contractor's coattails when you're building as a sub. So, I learned there's retail value, what job costing is, how basics of running a business, and did that for a long time. And we really grew. We were, around that 2.75 million range in the early 2000s. So we really grew. Today's dollars would be at least twice that, I'm sure. But it was a good experience for me. And where I came into it thinking that this is only temporary. I didn't really take, a deck business as a standalone company that serious. I just did, because I had done jobs on apartments where we would do 80 decks on one apartment job, but they were all kind of cookie cutter things and we could prefabricate them. But that's really how I ended up into the business. I left there and started Peachtree Decks and Porches in '07. And it was, like I've said, and people probably heard it enough, but it was just a little bit different approach to how I was going to build, what I was going to build, and how I was going to deliver it.
Well, I know that you mentioned that at Peachtree you introduced some features that weren't really commonplace in outdoor projects, such as aluminum railing and PVC trim, and you made them more commonplace. And today they're kind of ubiquitous. They're common in many projects. But what inspired you to add these different products, and how was being an innovator in the industry, how did that affect your business and progress your business?
Well, one, I won't take credit for the industry, the widespread use of it like it is now. But I actually, back in the late '90s, I really just was looking for ways to be different. I mean, that's always the kind of the challenge when you're in the Atlanta market and there's a lot of people, competing. You're trying to kind of find an edge and a way to be different. And I don't even remember how I found this company that was up in Surrey, Canada, which is a suburb of Vancouver. And they produced aluminum rail systems. They had component systems that you could order all the components and piece together. They had panelized systems, and they had also aluminum frames for glass rail. And so I started ordering it in the late '90s, and and that was part of the offering going back that far. Even a lot of the jobs, even the Bernie Marcus job had glass and aluminum, but the first deck that I built that I considered what I wanted to build in the future was built in 2001. It was before Peachtree, and it was, had these arches. I didn't know what PVC was. I'm not even sure PVC really was around, maybe in early form in 2001. But I had this idea that I really would like to build still that raw wood stained deck that people accept as what you build, and porches are decks. I wanted to build something differently. So I had this aluminum rail. I had this deck to me that looked like an extension of the home. It had archways on it. It was trimmed out with what was, I think at the time was called a blue MDF board. It was supposed to be for exterior use. It wasn't supposed to weak moisture or do anything, but it did. But I also knew how to build water tights going back to the early '90s. So we were using a membrane system. So that was really the beginning of it. But that was only a small percentage of what we sold when I was in the Atlanta Architect office. Most of our bread and butter was the wood decks, and I really wanted to get away from that. So when I started Peachtree, it was a total incorporation of those kinds of jobs. That we weren't going to offer anything else. We were going to offer jobs with PVC trim, porches with PVC columns. We were not going to use pressure treated decking anymore. We had different aluminum rail systems, others, besides the earlier version. So that was kind of the product offering that we were, leaning towards when I started Peachtree. And it was also about creating a reputation and a brand in a market that I could leverage off of, creating these layers of credibility, really using the website the way it should be used, showing this delivery history of certain jobs so that we could focus on that upper end job and grow the business through margin more instead of production.
Well, tell me, I'm sure you had your fair share of experiences along the way. Can you share maybe one of the more hilarious moments during your deck building years at Peachtree?
Well, we had a lot of, you build as long as I did, you got a lot of stories. Some of them you can tell, some of them you might not want to tell, but, we had everything go on from, dogs coming out doggy doors and dogs visiting us, come try to run across the deck when there's no decking on there. I remember one job we did, there was this golden retriever across the street. Whenever he got out, he came to see us. And I just happened to be on the job, and we had deck started at the driveway, went all the way around the house, and the crew had torn off all the decking and was working their way around the house. And when he came running up, he just saw them out there and he never stopped. And somehow that dog made it a surprising distance across the framing, no decking on it, before he flipped and went down and landed, on the ground, which, didn't hurt him, but it was interesting. And then we had a bulldog that came out the door went about 10 feet. The dog door was supposed to be closed off. So not necessarily funny then, but looking back, you can get a laugh out of it. Probably what some people think are funny, what I didn't think was funny at the time, is we were doing a job back during the 1996, was during the Olympics. And we had a customer that had a really nice house. We built a really nice project for them. And they referred us to their neighbors who were a couple houses or 3 houses down. So we had a lumberyard at the time. We operated our own lumberyard. We were doing the volume. We felt like we could kind of start a subsidiary, and we bought our own lumber direct, and we, added 2 or 3 points to the bottom line at the end of every year. But I let the guys in the lumberyard, I was going to let them make a little extra money. So I told them to put the stake sides on the low flatbed and go out to this job and start tearing this deck down. So they went by the office, or maybe it was the copy they had originally. When they got the copy, the toner was really low in the copy machine. So when they got out there, they didn't necessarily realize that instead of 600, they thought they were reading 600, but it was supposed to be 606. So they went out and they started tearing this deck down. And I called them on the radio. Back then we used Nextels. I called them and asked them how they were doing. And Don made the comment that, man, this thing has been hard. He said, all this rail was bolted up. We just got the rail off. And I had seen pictures of the job, so I knew there shouldn't be any bolted on rail. It was extended picket. So I asked him, I said, man, are you sure you're at the right place? I don't remember seeing anything with bolts. And he said, no. They said the customer came out. He was real nice. He's a Jamaican guy. And I was like, man, go look at the street number you're at. And when he did, I realized he was not at the right place. He was actually, believe it or not, the people that had given us the referral had left town because this was a common thing. They had rented their house out during the Olympics, and there were Olympic athletes staying at this house. And the guy that came out there and talked to him was one of the athletes. He had no idea we weren't supposed to be doing it. So he just came out. So my guys, how they didn't know or recognize our old wood rail system, I have no idea. But they tore all the rail off of that deck. So looking back, you can kind of get a laugh out of it. But it was not a phone call you want to make. You have to call that customer and say, look, I know you got people, athletes at your house, but we just tore down your rail, but we're going to make it good. So, I had to scramble, get crews out there, put up a temporary rail. And so I've heard other stories, that people do. They had a roofer telling me that they had did a tear off on this house one morning, and then they saw the shingle company or the roofing supply company come pulling up about 10 o'clock that morning and pulled into the driveway next door. He told one of his guys, run over there and stop him before he drops that off. He's at the wrong house, only to realize that he was at the wrong house and he was tearing the roof off the wrong house. So I'm not the only one that's done things like that.
So your crew tore off the railing of a project that you had already finished. Is that correct?
We had built a job a few years earlier. Back then it was old wood rail. It wasn't the nicer rail systems that we were doing now. And yeah, they did question it. They didn't. It was the one time too, I was really trying to help them make a little extra money. I was going to give them their 40 hours and pay them, the demo. But no, they did. Tore it off. And then we had to go back. We built them a nicer rail, but the trick back then is all the wood was stained, and it was hard to get the new rail to match the deck, but we did. And the customer handled it. They were good. Fortunately, we had a good enough relationship. They were okay.
Wrong time, wrong place, huh?
Yeah, it was.
Paul, there was one story that you wrote about, and it involved dirt clods. Can you share that story and how that impacted your crew?
Yeah. This was before the deck building days, but I was on an apartment job, and I had this one guy that I hired out of Atlanta, and he was kind of a little bit of a hothead. He was a high-strung guy, kind of cocky, and we had some issues with him on the jobs. But I remember one time one of the guys shot him accidentally, of course, in the leg with a staple gun, so I had to pull a 2-inch staple out of his leg. We got past that okay. Had to bail him out of jail in Chattanooga when we did an apartment job up there just because he got mouthy with the cops. And, but then later on, we were doing a job, and he got into this habit of throwing dirt clods. Whenever somebody go into porta john, shut the door, he'd just throw a dirt clod and bounce it off. I thought it was the funniest thing there was. If you ever been in a porta john when somebody does something like that, it's pretty loud and definitely unexpected. Well, I kept telling him not to do it, but he wouldn't stop. So finally one day he went in there, and I was up on a roof, and it was just a single story wing. So the graders had graded, they'd pushed all these huge clumps of clay and dirt clods, I guess you call them, over to the side. So I had one of the guys bring me one of those up on the roof, and I took it, and I had no idea that I could actually, I had this kind of range. I didn't think I could reach the Porta-John, but I was going to bounce it over there and get his attention. But I crow hopped across that roof. I shot put it. It was pretty impressive. Really good carry. Hit the top of the Porta-John right where the vent is, blew the vent out, rocked the Porta-John. And Jim, you could hear him in there screaming like, no offense intended here, but screaming like a woman inside this Porta-John. And then he comes falling out the door, and he's got his pants pulled down around his knees, and he rolls out in the yard, and he is pissed, but he had dirt all over him. He stood up, he had dirt on him, he had dirt in his pants, and he was not happy, but he never threw another dirt clod. He didn't stay. He quit not long after that. One of the few people I had quit, but I don't think he thought his life expectancy chances were real good working with us or something. I don't know.
That's classic. Kind of reminds me, my aunt and uncle live in the middle of nowhere in Oregon, and they, before they had any running water, before they had a bathroom even, they had a Porta-John, or porta potty is what we called them. And I just remember walking out there in the middle of the night in the woods, literally, and they were warning us, well, watch out for bears. And I just had stories of bears just coming and knocking the thing over, kind of like what you're discussing. And, just had this terrible fear that I was going to encounter a bear at the, wrong time. So it kind of reminds me of that story.
Yeah, if you have bears around, this was kind of something to think about.
Yeah. Well, after Peachtree, which I believe you sold in 2014, you began to work with manufacturers, and you started developing contractor relationships. Can you share a little bit about that time and what made you, transition to doing that?
Yeah, sure. Well, I had been building for a long time by the time 2014 got here. And I had thoughts of selling the business. I started having these ideas of things I want to do because I had been speaking, I guess, starting back in 2006. I had started speaking at the Deck Expos. And then I started doing that for years. And I just started having these ideas of things that I would like to do. And so I started thinking, I want to try to sell the business around 2016. But I ended up in this phone conversation with a friend of mine, who become a friend, that was a builder up in Jersey, and he was thinking of moving to Atlanta area. And the more we talked, the conversation just kind of led to me making a comment to him about, if you want to move down here and start a business, you should just buy mine and, save yourself the trouble of trying to develop a brand and so forth. So I ended up selling it to him in September of 2014. Took over a year to transition out and make sure everything was, he was ready to kind of take it on solo, and he was. So I had this idea about, if contractors that want to improve their business come to Deck Expo, for example, and they take these conference courses, they're there to improve their business. But the reality is there's a very, very small percentage of contractors that attend that. Most of them are in their own local areas doing their own thing, kind of like I was in my earlier days. And I thought, wouldn't it be good if we could go out to these people and we could share some things with them that they would benefit from? And my spiel kind of to at the time would have been Fortress and Trex and Versatex was, maybe if we can help them be better at their business, they're going to be better customers for you, and maybe we create some loyalty in the process. And I had these ideas. I knew what I had done that put my business on the map. I had these simple little approaches that I took that, you didn't have to have this business degree or this marketing degree to be successful. You just need to understand the need to do it. And there was a simplistic way of approaching it. And so that's what I wanted to share. So I put together this presentation. The first, I had trouble getting anybody really to kind of buy it at first because it wasn't something that was on a marketing person's, item line as far as marketing costs are expensive. They didn't know what the return on investment would be. So it was just something kind of new. People were a little afraid to touch it. Trex, I did a couple things with them, and they were interested, but not quite to the level at the time that I wanted to do. But then Fortress stepped in, and they did commit for a year at a certain amount of dates. And what I was going to do is go around and share my approach in a presentation, and do it for dinner or do it over lunch or breakfast, whatever the case happened to be. In fact, my first one was in Hillsburg, I think it is, California. Is that right? Up north of San Francisco. Very first one, believe it or not. Not sure how that worked that way, but that's how it was. But Versatex was also interested, so I did a few for them. And then I guess that was in 2016. And then prior to renewing up or discussing with Fortress, Trex came up, and Butch Palazzo was there, Kevin Majors, Chris Gearhart. They were all interested in doing it, and we put together a program for 3 years, for 2017, 18, and 19. So for 2 years, I traveled all around the country, with Trex. They would put together 25, 30 people. I didn't get up there and preach material. I didn't talk about product. It was all about, my presentation. They would do their thing too. And at the same time, in 17, I had already started doing the Versatex Roadshow. So I kind of juggled both of those things for 3 years, and then really came on with Versatex, full time, doing the roadshow and some other miscellaneous things as well. So it was great opportunity. And, I have to look back, and I have to say, in the early days, my early writing days, Sarah, I had, just through a fluke, as I kind of put in one of my pieces, I guess my column, I had sent an email to what used to be the earlier version of Deck Builder Magazine, Professional Deck Builder Magazine, which was owned by a different company, the founders, and they just sold it to Handy Wood, who I think now became Informa, and I'm not sure who it is now. But and I ended up connected with Andy Engel, had this conversation with him. He got me into writing. He kind of opened up the doors in a way to allow me to do a lot of things, and that entry there was what really kind of allowed me to do these other things.
And so, what is it that you like about writing your column?
Well, now because I have some experience behind me and things that I know work, I like the idea of being able to share it. Earlier on, it was more maybe some technical stuff, how to do this, how to build. The one thing I've really liked about writing for you and Patrick and David and the whole group there is, you don't limit. I can write about anything I want to write. And I don't really want to write about building techniques. It's not everybody knows. Most people know how to build. There's plenty of people that know technique. If anything, I'm probably out of the loop on, some of the last few years for not being out there physical building, but it allows me to share things that I think are important, and I can express it in the way I want to do it. And it's just been great. It's been a great opportunity, I feel like, and a good match to work with you on this. And it just allows me some really good opportunities to share what I believe in.
And tell me a little bit about, the focus of where you're taking the column now and what you hope to write about going forward.
Well, the truth is it gets harder and harder to write because, you've been doing it for a long time, and now you got it to 6 issues a year. So it's kind of hard to, I don't want to kind of rehash some of the things I've written about before. And some of the things that I wrote about earlier that I think were relevant is become more common knowledge now. In the earlier days, in 2008, different times when I was writing for it, it wasn't. My next column really is about, to an extent, it's about maintaining a culture, the importance of treating people right, the importance of, minimizing turnover, and simple ways to do that, how I did it, how I had people work with me for 22 and 24 years, not with me, I should say, and crew members that were with me for 10 or 12 years. It wasn't because I made them rich, but it was because I did provide a decent work environment. I did know how to treat people. I didn't know how to take care of them. I can't make anybody rich, but you pay them the premium. But this issue still kind of finalizing some things. It's kind of along the lines just to make people think, because you don't have to have multiple crews to have to understand this or have the need for this. It's if you're even on the crew. It's just, if you find good people, how do you keep them? It's hard enough to find them, but if you find them and you invest time into them, you spend months getting them to where they feel like they know your system and they can be productive, they can make money for you. Because the reality for a lot of people is those early weeks when you first hire somebody, they're not necessarily being productive enough to make money for you. They're kind of adjusting, they're kind of learning, you're kind of getting them synced in. So this is about, you know, if you're going to invest in them, keep them, don't let them leave, or don't do things that would cause them to leave.
Well, how do you find the right people? If you were to advise a deck builder looking for a crew today, what would be your number one bit of advice that you could share that you use that was successful for you?
Well, the truth is, I don't really know, because back most of the time when I was doing it, it was easier. I mean, I'm just going to shoot straight. It was easier to find people back in the day than it is now. You got, you know, a little bit different generation. They're not as outdoorsy necessarily. Not everybody wants to work with their hands. Not everybody wants to be out there. But I think I would look for people not necessarily with the high skill levels, but with the good attitudes, you know, that are positive, that I think can be motivated, that I think have a true interest. You know, I'm not sure exactly how to find those, but I know when I go out now, if I'm at a restaurant, I'm at a fast food place, wherever I'm at, the one thing I pay attention to, one thing I notice, it can be the people behind the counter at the hotel I'm checking into. It's their attitude, their professionalism, how they act. That's what you want to invest your time in. You got to have somebody that's, you know, physically able to do things, and that ideally have some skill level in what you're doing. But I you know, it can be hard to, you know, if you just got people that are applying and just want a job, there's a vetting process there that's just difficult to do. Not sure I'm explaining that well at all, but it's a tricky thing. It's a problem, you know, pretty much for everybody. I do see some people in my travels that say they have no problem, but they have less of a problem because they're established. The word has gotten out that it's a good place to work, that they pay, and they have a program. Their business is strong enough that they can charge enough a premium so that they can fund benefits and health insurance, those kinds of things. And that's important to people that are looking for jobs versus some guys that are out there that are still kind of in the earlier stages, and they're struggling a little bit. They really may be struggling with being able to charge a premium, or they haven't positioned their company or to put the things in place that allows them to do that. So they hire people and they pay them what they pay them, but there's really no benefits involved. And those people are going to jump ship if they can find another one that does have those packages available.
A deck is only as good as what holds it up. ProWood's TrueFrame joist is built different. #1 grade, ground contact treated lumber for strength you can count on. Kiln dried for stability you can trust. And precision engineered for uniform sizing that saves you time. Get advanced framing performance without changing your tools or techniques. It's wood that just works. TrueFrame joist, consistency you can build on.
Feature was released about you. The feedback I received from so many people and online was that you're the GOAT, the greatest of all times. And I think the reason that people say that is because you have an ability to relate to people and to just make everybody feel like a friend. And I just want to ask you, how do you do that? I mean, how is that, like Southern charm? Is that something you developed, or what can builders do to ingratiate themselves to, maybe homeowners or other builders so that, they could develop those deeper relationships that last for years to come?
Well, I mean, I appreciate what you said. I don't see myself as the greatest of all time. I see a lot of people out there that build better job than what I used to build. I think I came into it at a time where there was some opportunity to be different and maybe, do some things that weren't being done at the time that put me on the map. But I generally do like people, and I especially like, creative people and building people. And but anybody on the street, as far as friendliness, I just think you go further and have better luck being nicer to people versus not. And I think, mistakes some people might make, especially when you're younger and you hadn't figured some things out, is, and especially in today's world where social media is out there, you have to navigate wisely. You have to be careful what you say and how you conduct yourself, and the attitudes that you show, or the temper that you show, even the humility or arrogance that you show, because it's all recorded, it's all there. And I just think if you conduct yourself a certain way, and even if you have some success, if you do it in the right way, in the long run, those things are going to work better for you. You know, honestly, I mean, when I talk to people now, I mean, I've been really fortunate. I feel truly fortunate to have been able to do what I've done and get some recognition and to have had some of the things accomplished that we have. But when I talk to people, I want to find out what they're about. You know, I don't really want to talk so much about what I'm doing or what I've done. I like to find out what, you know, what they're about. I remember, and I think I mentioned this in an awards thing one night. I watched this video one time, and it was Jason Momoa, who is a guy that was on the Game of Thrones, a big Hawaiian guy, I guess. You know what I'm talking about? And he was doing some show, and some other actor who was new. He was a new actor. He was just kind of getting started. He came up to him, and he was so excited about meeting Jason Momoa. And he shook his hand, and he started asking Jason Momoa about this. And he turned it right around. And I learned something from this, because he turned it right around. He didn't want to talk about himself. He turned around and he asked this guy, well, tell me about you. What are you doing? He encouraged this guy. He wanted to hear what this guy had to say. And I think that guy will remember that for life. And I think when you have people like we have today, we've got so many great builders out there. They win these national awards. They get all this recognition, and they're proud, and they like to hear the praise, the singing, and they should, and they deserve it. But I think if they can stop and think sometimes when they're out there and this is happening to them, listen to it for a minute, but turn it around, and whoever you're talking to, you ask them what they're doing, how they're doing, encourage them, help try to give them some confidence, because they will remember that conversation a lot longer than you just sitting there telling them how good you are and what you've done and what you've accomplished. And I think that's kind of the thing that people that not technically or necessarily ambassadors for other companies are wearing the brand. But I just think if these guys out there, and I could name a whole long list of people that I'm thinking about, can do that sort of thing, they'll win these fans, they'll win these people over one at a time. And in the long run, it'll just pay off. Does that make sense?
It totally makes sense. And I think that's one of the same reasons I love doing this myself, is because I get to talk to people. I get to learn about them. You know, I get to have a better understanding of who they are and what makes them tick. And, you know, just being able to share those stories in a way that elevates maybe a voice that, you know, maybe the rest of the industry is not aware of, that what they're doing and how they're, you know, how they're standing out in the industry in their unique way. I think that's what makes publications like Deck Specialist so important and so special, is just that celebration of so much talent and so much, you know, ingenuity and just, you know, just incredible creative, you know, talent that this industry has. And that just such a blessing to be able to, you know, share these stories. And I want to go back just a little bit, back to your Versatex time. Was there? I know that when I've been on road, you know, traveling on the road and, you know, road trips, and I've seen a few things, and I haven't even traveled, you know, as much as you were. And, you know, I remember one time I was in the middle of somewhere in Utah, I have no idea where, and came over a rise, and there was a boat on the road, just on the road, no truck, no trailer, no person, no nothing. It's almost like if you took a spatula and you put it underneath the boat and you just drop the boat down on the ground, right? And
He
just left it.
didn't look at his mirror enough. He should have been watching his mirror. Probably
And I
just
thought,
lost the boat.
well, you know, I'm sure along the way you had to come across some unique situations yourself. Do any come to mind that you would like to share?
Well, I'll tell you one. I mean, I've seen in some ways more things than I wanted to see when I was on the road. I was doing about 20,000 miles a year for 7 years, running around. But I remember one time every year before I'd start, and we'd always start down in Florida on the road show. We would go south because we could go earlier because the weather was warmer, and then we would turn north after, a little bit later in the spring, usually, towards sometime middle of April, I guess. We'd spend 4 weeks in Florida and another week on the Gulf. But one year I had before I would start, I would take the trailer over to this place that where we bought the trailer here in Mocksville, North Carolina, and they would service it, check the bearings, check the brakes, make sure everything's good, because the last thing I want to do is have a problem when I'm on the road. Well, I go out and I'm into the fifth week, and I have left Biloxi, Mississippi, I think it was, or Ocean Springs, Mississippi, and I'm going north. I'm on a Friday. I've got all day to get up to where I'm going to go towards the Midwest. I don't remember exactly where, but I know had been in a lot of traffic. I was just north of Birmingham. On my way, next big town would have been Nashville. And I'm doing about 70, 75 miles an hour. And I've had cars around me all morning, but for some reason it clears up then, and I feel something. And I look in my mirror and I see a wheel right beside my trailer, just tracking, running right with it. And I hate to even admit it, but first I was thinking, where did that come from? But then I realized it came off the trailer. So I had tandem wheels, so you got two wheels on each side. So this wheel is traveling 70 miles an hour, about 3 feet away from the trailer, running right parallel with me. So I started easing over because I don't want to bump it and make it go across the interstate, because this is Interstate 65, I think it was. 70 miles an hour, I slow down. This wheel passes me. Still got it's not only the wheel now, it's got the brake drum is still attached to it because it's broken off. Comes off, passes me, angles off the road, goes across embankment, up an embankment, jumps the barbed wire fence, probably still doing 60 miles an hour, and disappears into the woods. So I pull over, I look back, I see smoke coming off the axle. I'm like, holy crap, this was like a good relaxing day until just now. And I go out, and it takes me a long time to find the wheel, because this thing, I'd find a tree here and there that it had hit, knocked the bark off of, but I was literally tracking it, and I must have found it 50 yards back in the woods, rolled it out, slid it under the barbed wire fence, got in front of it, rolled it down so I wouldn't let it roll back out into traffic, and got it in the trailer. And so I didn't necessarily see anything like you did to talk about, but that was an experience I had. And fortunately, that trailer would run. You could roll some axles like that. You can't run without the wheel on it. Mine, I could. But what happened is, when they serviced the trailer, something didn't get put back on right. And it showed up in South Tennessee.
That actually kind of happened to me. Go ahead. Sorry about that.
I'm sorry. I was just saying, there's always an adventure out there somewhere.
Yeah, it kind of reminds me, when I was in junior high school, we had one of those, school trips where you go up the mountain, and all is well, and we're coming back down the mountain, and I look to my right, and there's fire coming up from the wheel in the window right next to me. I'm literally right next to this, and I see fire coming up, and I was like, I'm pretty sure that's not supposed to be there. And we're going down, a pretty high mountain, in our area, about 6,000 feet or so. And that thing was on fire all the way down until we found a safe spot. And I had to stay there, and I couldn't move away from it or anything. That was where the emergency exit was. So I had to wait till the whole bus cleared out before I could get out, because you couldn't get out the back because it was on fire. And turns out they had not bled the brakes, similar to to what you were describing. They had not bled those brakes, and so as a result, the friction caught fire. And thankfully everybody was safe. But sometimes those memories they stick with you. You're kind of glad to get out of it safely.
Yeah.
I would say, after your contractor development days, in 2023, you moved into working with IG Railing. Can you share why you made that move and where it's led you to today?
Yeah, well, the road show had gone on a long time, and it was still good. And it, my friends Rick Capers and John Pace at Verstex made it clear, we can do this as long as you want to do this. It ends only when you want it then, and we, there are other things that we can do. So I kind of thought I might just kind of ride into the sunset with Versatex. I mean, they were great to me all through the years. But we still had good attendance. but I didn't want to run it until, it just wasn't, there was no value to it anymore. And at the same time, Mark Benecki, who was a friend that I had met in Australia, I think in 06 or 07, he came to the Deck Expo. I had conversations with him from years earlier, and I knew he was wanting to bring, glass rail system, to the US, and IG Rail being the system. And I had a couple conversations, and he partnered with a friend of mine, Pat Noonan, and Mike Kennard was part of that, a big part of that. And so they had this, they had already gotten it started. And we'd had a conversation, I guess, a year and a half prior, but I wasn't ready to make a move. I really wanted to kind of stay where I was at, but I did feel like they were onto something. I felt like the fact that they were wanting to have standard panel sizes, so you didn't get into the custom order that most people think about when you're doing glass rail system, having a really easy to install system, and not all quality components. So I knew they were onto something, and I felt like it was a category where it could grow. So when we ended up having another conversation, at that point, the discussion led to me being, a limited partner in the business, and taking on the brand development role mainly. And I had kind of, without even thinking about it, through all these roadshow years, I had made all these contacts and acquaintances, and I learned more about the distribution side, learn more about the retail lumberyard side, and just made a lot of friends in the process. And so in a way, it was kind of shaping me to take on this role. So, when I made the move, it was because I felt like, one, I kind of liked the idea of being part of a startup one more time. I'd been started up with the Architect in Atlanta office when it started in '89. I had started Peachtree, and I felt like this was an opportunity, even though they had been doing it 3 years, they were still kind of in those very early phases, that it was something I thought I could make a difference in, and that it would be fun to be part of something that could grow. And I felt like it absolutely was a category that was not really, the surface had barely been scratched as far as glass rail goes, because most people customers don't come asking for glass rail. They come asking maybe for cable because they want a view. And we look at cable rail people as our potential customer, as our prospect. And so, that's what really, got me into there. And having known Pat for as long as I had, since '06, and having known Mark, I felt like I was, joining up with people that I knew and that I could trust. And then, of course, I didn't really know Mike, but Mike and I have become really great friends. Mike brings a lot of business savvy to the table, a lot of knowledge from what he's done. So, and then we have another person, Luke, who's on inside sales, very great guy. He knows the business. Pleasure. So we're small, but we're growing from a brand development standpoint. We feel like we've done a lot in the last couple of years, and even before, to develop the brand.
And where would you hope that the brand would go to, would evolve into?
Well, we want it to grow, just simply grow as a business. Like any business, you want to get some traction, you want to get some brand awareness, and you want to create some demand, and you want to grow the business. You want to drive the volume up, drive the dollars up, drive the value up. So that's what we want to do. And and the glass rail is our bread and butter, but we've introduced a couple other products. One more so because it solves what is considered a potential objection to glass rail, and that people think with glass rail, there's a maintenance issue, there's a cleaning issue. We have a glass treatment product that really minimizes that. I won't say it eliminates it, but it minimizes it. And even cable rail has, if you really look into it, has maintenance. You got tension, you got to deal with on the wires every now and then. You got to tighten them up. You got a coating you got to put on there, especially in oceanfront stuff. So none of them are totally maintenance free. And then we brought in another system, which is IG switch. So you've seen these showers that will be opaque and then they become clear, or you've seen conference rooms that can be opaque or become clear. Well, that's what we have, and it's really, we see it being used more as privacy, especially on the ends of decks like we used to build. We would have privacy fences on the end. This could be something to create privacy at some point, or you can see through it either way. So we have also brought that on, and we're looking at it kind of evolving more into the commercial side, or have some options for that. Mike Kennard has some experience there, and has some connections there. So that's another area that we want to go in, but we want to be careful. We want to grow it right, not try to grow too fast. And you know, again, we're small. We don't have the pockets like some of the major manufacturers that you know, but we've come a fairly long ways pretty quick.
And are you glad you made the change?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I travel, but I don't travel anything like what I used to travel. You know, I work from home a lot. I do trainings from here. I do a lot of phone calls from here. I'm even able to do a surprising amount of table talks, little venues where I can just drive from here. So I'm home a lot more. You know, I had my mindset before. I was doing 150, 160 nights a year in hotels. And during COVID, there was one period I didn't come home for 5 weeks because I was afraid to fly out of the New York area, afraid they would try to quarantine me if I came back. You know, so it's been a good move.
Well, I know that in the latest feature, in your words, you shared a lot about who you were thankful for and the gratitude you had for people who helped you along the way during your career. And tell me why that was important to include that in your answers, and why being grateful is so important to you.
Well, I think it should be for everybody, you know, anybody. But, you know, I think, Sarah, in doing the interview with you, you know, it made me stop and think, you know, look how fortunate I've been. Look what I've been able to do. You know, it's not a grueling, stressful job. You know, it hasn't really been that ever since I sold the business. So, and it made me stop and kind of reflect a little bit and look back. And I'm thinking, how did this even all happen? And I look back, and it started with Andy Engel, who became the editor at Deck Builder magazine. I had provided content for the earlier version of that magazine, pictures, so I wasn't doing any writing. And I sent him this email, and I don't remember what the email was even about, but it didn't go to who I thought it was going to go to. It got forwarded to Andy. He'd been on the job 3 days, and we started talking, and we just kind of hit it off. Had similar sense of humor, and once he understood who had been doing, because we had done a lot of jobs and a lot of big commercial jobs that were pretty interesting deliveries. And he asked me if I wanted to write, and I didn't at first, but I ended up doing that, and that kind of opened doors. So I felt it was important to thank him. And then if I look at other kind of, I don't know if you call them milestones, but other definitely important points, you know, in my career, you know, it was with Fortress. You know, I was trying to get somebody to buy into this program, and then, you know, and Fortress did. I mean, it was, you know, kind of limited, but they did, and they gave me a chance. And once I started doing that, you know, Trex was interested, and they bought in a lot bigger way. So I wanted to thank, you know, those people there. And like I said, you know, in those earlier days, you know, it was Butch Plaza who's still there, and Chris Gerhardt and Kevin Majors have moved on to other places, but these were all top quality people, and they bought into this, and they allowed me this opportunity. You know, and once you get that opportunity to keep doing it, just kind of seems like you can build value on your brand and on yourself. You know, people at least think you must know something, or these people with money and have you doing what you're doing. And of course, Rick Capers at Versatex, you know, he understood it probably sooner than anybody, and really realized this is something, because he thinks outside the box. He didn't really care. He didn't have to have an established return on investment. He saw what the value could be. So I had done a few of the creating separation things with him, but then the roadshow came about, because I used to do the Cats Roadshow. It was a different thing, a lot bigger event than what I did, but mine were hitting more, you know, specific places and a little more targeted. So I felt it was important to thank them. And then if you read that piece, there's a friend of mine that I met in 2006 from Australia, Philip Hutt. And if you knew the guy, I mean, if he comes in the room, you'll know he's there. He's a big, tall guy, super good natured. He's just got a way about him. And, you know, when in 2006, I was a speaker at the Deck Expo. Actually, I was on a panel. There was 4 of us at the opening ceremonies. That's how they used to do the Deck Expo. 300 people sitting in the room. And after show's over, Philip comes up and introduced himself. Well, we became really good friends, and he knew what I was trying to do. So we've known each other since 2006. And I remember in 2015, I was at a Deck Expo in Baltimore, and I started thinking, you know, this is not going to fly. I'm not getting any bites on this. I'm going to have to go more for consulting and coaching and do something different. And I remember having that conversation on a friend's porch in Baltimore. I think it was a party or something that somebody put on there. And I was telling Philip, man, I don't think don't think it's going to work. I think I got another direction. But he was like, no, you need to stick with this. There's some value to what you're trying to do. Somebody will buy into this. So I mentioned him just because he encouraged me at a time when I was starting to doubt that it would work. So I want to give him a little credit for that. He probably hasn't even read it. He's in Australia, but I want to give him that. He's a good friend. I don't talk to him. I don't see him, but he came and spent a week with me just to kind of shadow me to see what I was doing with my business, so came pretty close. So I just think it's important to remember how you get to where you get. Don't take things for granted. Don't take people for granted. Make sure people know you appreciate things. It's okay to thank people more than once. I used to thank Andy every time I saw him, for giving me the opportunity, because what you allow me to do this writing got me onto the Expo advisory committee, which, just kind of one thing kind of led to another. So I don't think you take things for granted. I don't think when people help you, definitely need to show the appreciation. And I think if these people that help you think it was appreciated, they're probably more likely to help somebody else. Who knows?
Yeah, I think your gratitude is a superpower, frankly. And, I think it's a key to why people do, connect with you so easily. And you just really make people feel, a part of a universal world, the building world, if you will. Now, let me ask you this. If there was one thing you could share with other builders, maybe one bit of advice or, some sort of, something you've learned along the way that could change their businesses, what would that be?
Well, I look at business like there's not one key aspect that you got to do right. I feel like there's all these different things that have to work. The key is that you got to do a lot of things work together. But I'll tell you what if I got to say it like you're asking me, here's what I would tell you, and I would turn this around on you. Because this is what you wrote, and I look back at mine, and everything wasn't always setbacks along the way, but I didn't give up. And I think, and you wrote in your editorial, your intro to the magazine, you had this little saying, and that stuck with me, where you say, success doesn't belong to those that never stumble. It belongs to those who keep moving forward. I think that's a really powerful statement. And I think everybody out there needs to always remember that, because there's very few people that just jump out there and go into business and have a rhythm and just go wide open and grow and everything's great. That is rarely the case. You look at businesses, you may think that because they look good, they're well known, good brands out there, but believe me, there's been some bumps in the road. And I think what you said there, the way you always have this way of, I can write 10 paragraphs and you say it all in one. You have this that's why you do what you do. But I thought that there, don't be discouraged. Keep your head up, keep moving forward. Being in business and being one of the better people operators. It is a mindset, but it takes determination. It takes some willpower and the right mental mindset to get there.
I agree. And thank you for sharing that. I didn't think it would impact you like that, but it's really how I felt, because you're right. There's no direct path to success. There's going to be ups and downs along the way. And I can tell you, just getting here, there's been some ups and there's been some downs, just getting here now, but being able to do this and being able to talk with you and being able to, share your ideas of your column and just talk things through. And I love how we collaborate sometimes, and you'll bring up ideas or I'll bring up ideas, and somehow we, a better thing comes from that. It's just a privilege to me. It's a privilege to everybody here. Everybody just absolutely loves you. And I just want to say thank you again for being part of the deck specialist world and just for making such an impact on the industry, and a positive one. And, if there was just one question I had for you, and, jokingly, What do you do? What do you use in your hair? Because I really need some of that.
You know, when somebody asked me that one time when I was doing the road show, and I was like, man, whatever the hotel has. So it is whatever the hotel has. I don't, I just use a shampoo and a conditioner, and it varies what that is. Not sure I can't remember the name of what's in the bathroom now, but it's getting kind of frizzy. It used to be thicker, and it didn't used to be white. It used to be a little bit different blonde, and this was always black. It was interesting. My hair was one color, my beard was jet black all my life. So it's always different. But no, Sarah, I appreciate all the kind of things. There's a lot of good people in this industry. You're definitely one of them. It has been an absolute pleasure. And I'm not saying this just to make points here. I mean, it really has been an absolute pleasure working with you and riding with you. And you have helped me. You know, you allow me these opportunities, but when I'm not sure about something, I can bounce it right off of you. And you just have an impressive way of taking it in and organize it. You got some built-in AI program in your brain there. You just kind of take it all in, filter through all the unnecessary stuff, and spit out what is the intentions of the piece. You know, so I appreciate what you do. I appreciate the nice things you said in the intro to the interview. It was really, really appreciated. But it's been my pleasure.
Well, thank you again, and I look forward to when we meet up again. You know, I think we have a trade show coming up, but I look forward to seeing you there, and you know, and we'll talk more about this.
Sounds good, sir. I'll see you in a couple of weeks, assuming
All right.
the planes are flying and so forth. So,
No kidding. All right. Well, thanks again. Please take care.
thank you. Okay.
Bye-bye.